And welcome to today's edition of Dr. Carole's Couch. I'm your psychiatrist host, Dr. Carole Lieberman. Well, we have a really interesting show for you today, things that could set the medical establishment on its ear. And the topic is, are Lyme disease and other chronic illnesses a result of biowarfare? And my guest says they are. My guest is A.W. Finnegan, Adam Finnegan. He is the author of The Sleeper Agent, The Rise of Lyme Disease, Chronic Illness, and the Great Imitator Antigens of Biological Warfare. Now, Adam is a survivor of Lyme disease himself. That's what got him interested in this. And he also has had other health problems since he was young, and he had the onset of a chronic disease in 2016. He's a writer, graphic artist, and designer, and he has studied this. His own illnesses have led him to study the life and work of Eric Traub, who you may not have heard of, but you will hear about him today, and the science of immune tolerance. He's collected and translated. This is a man on a mission. He has collected and translated to English all of Traub's published research. He lives in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, peacefully by himself, he says, where he enjoys BMX biking, fitness, studying the arts, and self-development. So welcome to the show, Adam.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay. Now, this is sort of an interesting story. It sounds like you're kind of a hermit.
No, I mean, yeah, sort of, kind of, but yeah, I mean, it can go both ways. I love getting out on the bike every day, and I have people around here that I talk to. I sometimes meet up with my friends that go to the skate park, but yeah, I mean, I am kind of an introvert, you could say, and
Oh,
you see over here all of these three-ring binders. That was like all of the translated stuff and all of the work that went into this book, The Sleeper Agent.
yes, let me make
I
sure
was definitely a man on a mission. I mean, I felt like I was driven by a force like almost beyond me. It was just this passion. And there was a point where I had read this book years ago, Lab 257, and that was the book that kind of suggested that Lyme disease may have came from Plum Island, and it talked about that Nazi scientist that we brought over here in Operation Paperclip, Eric Traub. And I just thought this guy is really mysterious. And so I started looking into him. And I also had been involved in like different Lyme groups on like Facebook and stuff. There was an organization called Truth Cures that I was involved in, and they taught me, how this chronic disease works. And they said it's called immune tolerance. It's a term that was used for like it's chronic immunosuppression, right? And it's kind of like the basis of the chronic disease. But then when I started looking into Eric Traub,
Well,
I
wait.
found
Let me
okay,
interrupt you
yeah,
for a
sure.
minute
Okay,
because I
yeah, no
want to
problem.
I want to start from the beginning,
Hmm.
which is you're getting sick from Lyme, and actually before that, your mother getting sick from Lyme. So tell us about
Right.
that.
Yeah, so like my mom got it in like the 2000 early 2000s or whatever, and I was familiar with it. And I remember somebody on my street when I was growing up in Grafton, Massachusetts also had it. So I was a little familiar with it. My mom got really sick, and so I had kind of like a first direct experience of how debilitating it can be for others. And I had read this book, Lab 257, I think around 2006 or so. And I was just really, it was an interesting thing. And those are kind of the books that I would like to read. Like I always found, for some reason, I was always kind of interested in the whole biowarfare ideas or the books about them and stuff. So that's like the first thing I would go look for if I was in a library. And it was in a library that I found that book. So I
Oh,
read that. And so as time went on, eventually I got bit by a black-legged tick and got really sick. And then it was kind of like when I would go to the medical system, I also realized how the medical system kind of like they don't take care of this properly. Like my mother told me it's very controversial and um they don't address it properly. So when I tried to get help and I realized like they don't really do much for you, I was kind of like on a mission to find out why this is the case.
Uh-huh.
And when I started looking into Eric Traub, I there was a point where I decided, okay, I'm going to write a book. I had put a timeline together, right, about Lyme disease and biowarfare, and I had sent it to someone named John Loftus. John Loftus wrote the foreword to the sleeper agent, and he was a Justice Department federal prosecutor and a Nazi hunter.
Huh.
And he was the first one to say in like public, he wrote it in a book called The Belarus Secret, that Lyme disease was the result of biowarfare experiments gone awry. Um, and that was in 1982.
Huh.
He wrote that book, and he said because of these Nazis we brought over here. And so I had sent him this timeline that I made. I found him on like Facebook. I messaged him. I didn't hear back for a while, but then he got back to me and he was like, "Why don't you give me a call? This is great work, you know." So we talked, and he said, you know, he had all of these sources very high up, and John Loftus had the highest security clearance you can hold in government.
Huh.
Um, it's a Q clearance and he's a cosmic clearance. And he had other people. He was like an attorney, and he would have people come to him, and they would come to him trying to get him to get things to be declassified because he had like this really famous 60 Minutes piece about how we brought all these Nazis over here, and some of the stuff about it got declassified after that. So people are coming to him with things that happened in government that they weren't very, you know, happy about. And it's like, why don't we try to get this declassified? But he had a guy in biodefense who told him a lot of this stuff, and he had kind of written up like this memo, and I had read it, and it gave me a lot of leads into like what to look into. But I started looking heavily into this Eric Traub guy, and uh the the biowarfare stuff is like so I've documented it in the book like so heavily, like all of the sources, you know, like declassified stuff. Because a lot of people don't realize we had a biological warfare
Okay.
program, you know.
We had a what?
We had a
A biological.
biological warfare. Yeah, like
Okay.
people, because you know, today when you say that word, a lot of people think, oh, it's conspiracy theory, but it's absolutely not. Like it's so well documented, especially, you know, like all those three-ring binders back there. Um,
Excuse me.
it was
Well, but let me ask you something.
sure.
For people who don't, not everybody knows what the symptoms and tell people. Let's start off more by telling people. Well, you could talk about yourself and your mother. What
Yeah,
the symptoms are. Where do you have some idea where both of you, either of you, were when you got bitten by the tick?
yeah, I was in Cape Cod. I think it was the year 2016, and it was a really bad year for ticks. Like they were all over the place. And I remember several people had died from Powassan virus. And that was a big thing going around. I mean, for all I know, I could have that as well because it says that when people it doesn't always cause those acute diseases, and some people get these chronic forms. But I did get a certain test that said I had Lyme disease, even though when I went to the regular doctors and they gave me the CDC approved test, it said I was negative.
Huh?
And that was kind of why I joined these Facebook groups. But the symptoms are like, I mean, I still have chronic headaches that are always there. And like a lot of my face is like the upper part of my face is like numb and tingly all the time. And also a feeling like you're poisoned. You just feel awful. It's like this, you know, this malaise and chronic fatigue, joint pains all over. It just does not feel good at all. And it's the whole idea behind this, because people ask, well, why would they make bioweapons that don't kill you? You know? And because that's what most people think of when they think of biological warfare agents, as things that would kill quickly in large numbers, but this is like a different strategy. This is a long-term strategy of tire, exhaust, and overwhelm an enemy or overwhelm a target country. Um, and so there was a biological warfare race and it was active. And I even talked about in the beginning of my book how the President George Washington was talking about how the British were using smallpox against the Continental Army. So it's like, and that was like well documented. And so it's a form of biological warfare, and it's much more successful because when you have a whole nation just worn out, and there's also another aspect to this where it can cause mental illnesses like neurological and psychiatric symptoms. So that was also another part of it. But yeah, like chronic headaches and just feeling awful. Uh, and it just does not go away, and it's really hard. I mean, you get used to living with it, but
So what did you do? Did you find any doctors to treat it?
not really. I haven't had much luck treating it. I mean, I just kind of do basic things like try to have a good diet and getting out and exercising is a really big thing every day, like that's getting on my bike and stuff. But no, I haven't really found a way to cure it. I mean,
Well,
and a lot of
have you gone to doctors, and what kind of
yes,
response do you
I
get from
did some
them?
I did some antibiotics for a while, but I don't know, I didn't feel it made me feel kind of horrible, and I don't know. I had talked to so many people that said, "Yeah, I did all of this, and this, and nothing has worked for me." And a lot of people drain their bank accounts trying to get better, and so I was just kind of like taking a different approach, and I don't really know how to address this at the moment, but all I do is try to cope with it the best way that I can, and try to live a meaningful existence to the best of my ability. But that was, the whole idea is putting this together. It was like that was the starting point. It was like getting sick, and it was almost like they got the wrong person sick. And so I did this. John Loftus gave me some. John Loftus actually introduced me to one of his sources, who I believe is now passed away, but he was very high up in the biodefense thing, and he thought my research was amazing. And he said, "Yeah, what you're saying is very on point." Um, so when I started going into Traub, it was like I was on a mission. And I mean, John also introduced me to these filmmakers that were going to make a screenplay about this. And so we were all kind of working together. It didn't pan out for them, but they helped me get a lot of documents. Like I had to pay a lot of money to get like all of Eric Traub's German research. Like it was only available at like German universities, and I had to go through this distributor who had access to it, and I would buy the PDFs of each. I collected his entire catalog of published work, and then many of his colleagues. He was over in Germany. So Eric Traub came here in the 1930s and went to the Rockefeller Institute. And he was working on vaccine research. And of course, it was probably biological weapons research too. But he discovered the mechanisms of these chronic diseases. And it was something called immune tolerance. And what he did was he injected foreign protein or antigen into a mouse's brain and reactivated a dormant virus called LCM virus, and it caused this chronic disease. Um, and it would be passed, some of it would be passed down to the next generation and the next generation. And it basically brought this triplet of chronic disease or wasting diseases, uh, neurological, and that kind of brings in with the psychiatric aspect too, and then cancer. He noticed that it would make the cancer rate skyrocket. So he started messing around with that, but he was over here. But then when World War II came about, he decided he was going back to Germany, and he would, be part of the Nazi regime. And so when he went back to Germany in 1938 or 39, that's where I found him with the spirochetes, and that's where I found him learning about all of the different co-infections that you could put into a tick, which it was all the same stuff that would later be found in the United States. So in the 1939 was a big year for Eric Traub. that's where I found uh, him getting his knowledge on ticks, because it's really hard to find him having any association with tick research. But this is where it happened, and he ended up going to this island off Germany called Insel Reams. It's like the German Plum Island, and that's where he started developing these kinds of weapons in the war. Um, and so that's why a lot of people don't realize it was over in Germany first. Like he started creating these strains. It came from a bird strain of Lyme disease called Borrelia anserina. And that's where I had Eric Chaub in possession of that spirochete in the 1930s, in 1939 over there. And so there were several strains that were released over there first, like in Europe, right? And then it basically follows everywhere Eric Traub goes. Like, so he came back over to America. Actually, let me back up. When he was on in Insel Reams, the Soviet Union had captured that island in East Germany, and he was basically they were interrogating him, and he was subject to Soviet blackmail because of war crimes. And they basically like got him to work for the communists, the Soviet Union, and with the help of these Soviet moles and British intelligence, set up this fake escape to West Germany, and then facilitate his coming to America as an agent, as a double agent, right? And
The purpose of it was to spread these kinds of the biological warfare in America.
mhm,
I mean, this
yes,
is fascinating, and it would certainly make a fascinating movie. Well,
absolutely.
we need to take a break right now, but we
Hmm.
will be coming back. I couldn't help but think about how there are some similarities to the COVID vaccine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that spike protein is basically the same thing that is on the Lyme disease spirochete. Um, so
Okay.
that's the thing that causes the chronic disease. So whether it's on a spike, whether it's, you know, uh, if you just inject the spike protein alone or these antigens that I talk about, that's why I called it the great imitator antigens, that will cause the chronic disease. The
Uh-huh.
spirochetes are more or less just a vehicle to get it into you.
Okay, we'll talk more about that when we come back so that
Yes,
you can explain it a little more. All right,
sure.
we're we're talking today with my guest, Adam Finnegan. His book is called The Sleeper Agent: The Rise of Lyme Disease, Chronic Illness, and the Great Imitator Antigens of Biological Warfare. Now that's a mouthful, but this is obviously really something very interesting that people, that our government, that the medical establishment should be looking into. So stay tuned. And welcome back to Dr. Carol's Couch. I'm your psychiatrist host, Dr. Carol Lieberman, here with my very interesting guest. I could just see how he could be sort of the protagonist in a movie about this because it's so hard to believe. And Adam, you have A.W. Finnegan, Adam Finnegan. He is it's like you're a perfect character. I hope you don't mind me saying this, but
They actually wanted to make me a character in that.
yes, because you're like this hermit in Massachusetts, and you're figuring out all this stuff that American doctors or American government, isn't doing. And I know a
Absolutely.
lot of people. In fact, I have a good friend who was attacked by a Lyme disease tick. Maybe it's been about 6 years ago or so, and she really has a lot of physical problems. Some of the ones that you've described. It can cause all kinds of things. She did get some help from antibiotics, but people are really just sort of making a lot of this stuff up. They really don't know enough about it. So it's really interesting that because you had Lyme disease or have Lyme disease, your mother had it. Um, how is your mother doing now? Is she better?
She's good. I mean, she's still sick, but she goes to a doctor and yeah, she's doing good. She's doing good. Not as, not sick like she used to be, but she is still sick. So, excuse me.
She's just learned to live with it like you have.
Yeah, and just do your best. And she's trying to treat it. Um, and so, yeah, they actually wanted to make me a character in it. And I just, for some reason, it was like a force beyond myself. I'm like, I gotta figure this out. As I just had this deep intuition that it was Eric Traub behind this Lyme disease thing. That's actually why I started looking into Eric Traub, because John Loftus had said in this book, Lab 257, that it was Eric Traub releasing ticks on shorebirds on Plum Island that started this Lyme disease thing.
Well,
And
what
when
is that book about?
Lab 257 is about Plum Island. It's called
Yeah.
Lab 257, the disturbing story of the government's secret Plum Island germ laboratory,
Mm.
right? In the Long Island Sound in New York.
Huh.
And then early in the book, it talked about Eric Traub. And John Loftus was actually a source for this book. And he talked about how, people were saying that he was releasing ticks on the island. And so I basically went into it to see, he said, even more disturbing are the records of the Nazi germ warfare scientists who came to America. They experimented with poison ticks dropped from planes to spread rare diseases. I have received some information suggesting that the U.S. tested some of these poison ticks on the Plum Island artillery range off the coast of Connecticut during the early 1950s. Most of the germ warfare records have been shredded, but there is a top secret U.S. document confirming that clandestine attacks on crops and animals took place at that time. So I started looking in and I was able to find where Eric Traub got that spirochete, and I was able to link that particular spirochete as the closest relative of Lyme disease. It became Lyme disease when he started weaponizing it. Um, and he was over in Germany first, and then I found that everywhere he went, Lyme disease also goes. And
Huh.
when he came over here, he was they were actually running a bird program. Like he said planes, but they had this bird program too, because it was like use the birds and the ticks to spread the disease far and wide. And he was traveling back and forth between Colombia in South America and Plum Island. And I noticed he would always go down there when the birds were flying south, and then he'd come back up when the birds are flying north.
Huh.
There was a program called Operation Starbright, um, by the U.S. government. It was a bird program involved with biowarfare. Uh, and so, like in my book, I document everything, with a citation, with whatever I say. And there's over 1,000 citations in here, all to official stuff, like declassified documents, Eric Traub's research, all of it. So I really put it together in a way that is, I'm trying to make a case like almost as if the public, in a court of law, like the public, to show the public, I make my case and I kind of follow the same rules as you would if you were in a court of law. Like, you have first person testimony, John Loftus and his sources is one set of evidence. And then I have um, I kind of followed the entire story. Like I showed how the black-legged tick wasn't carrying any human diseases all the way up to in the late 1940s. right? And even in not early 1950s, and it was in the 1950s, like 1950 to 1951, when Eric Traub was doing all of this. And then by 1950, 1958, I see reports of the black-legged tick having causing serious human disease. And there was a woman named Polly Murray who wrote a book about it's called The Widening Circle, about her experience with Lyme disease. She was like one of those early cases and was very involved in when they were bringing it out and discovering it. But she says she got sick in the summer of 1955 or 56, right? And then I have Alan Steer, one of the main Lyme disease people from the establishment, saying they found evidence of it like all the way back in 1962. So it definitely goes back, even though they said 1975 is when they kind of acknowledged it with this certain epidemic in children. It had been spreading for decades. Um, and that's kind of like what I show in the sleeper agent too, is like it wasn't 1975 when it started. I mean, that's when they acknowledged Lyme disease. So a lot of people think, oh, Lyme disease started in 1975, but no, it was
Uh-huh.
spreading. It was spreading since the early 1950s. Um, and they were, they were also studying it in these multiple sclerosis studies that they were doing. And there was a doctor who was finding spirochetes in those MS patients.
So,
So
good.
yeah, so I followed it, and I also found, like how Eric Traub is getting expertise on the same co-infections, because it's not just Lyme disease you get. Usually you get Lyme disease, Bartonella, Babesia, Rickettsia, Ehrlichiosis, all of these different things, and that's what he was learning, how to roll all of that into one tick.
Uh,
And it would cause this immune tolerance. So it would load you up with all of these infections and then at the same time reactivate dormant viruses you already have within you, like Epstein-Barr virus and a lot of those, like herpes simplex. And when they reactivate, they're actually neurotropic. They they deteriorate the brain. They take the way of the brain, and that's where you start getting people with psychiatric problems as well, because those viruses, when they reactivate, have definitely been linked to so many psychiatric illnesses.
hmm.
And so he really he was like ahead of his time. Like he had found this science, and it was strange because they ended up calling it immune tolerance. And the whole idea behind immune tolerance is that you're tolerating these nasty pathogens that your immune system should otherwise be keeping out,
Hmm.
but it's because it's so suppressed it can't fight back. Um, and the weird thing was that in 1960 they gave the Nobel Prize for immune tolerance to these two guys that didn't work together and were never nominated together by anyone. And they made it about organ transplants
Hmm.
because the same condition happens with these organ transplant recipients. And so it was very strange. It was so relevant to infectious disease and antigen. And I personally think they did this because they realized how much of a problem this is going to cause for vaccine science. If these antigens are able to cause this immune tolerance, that's a big deal. Um, and they started using them in a lot of vaccines, and that's why it basically burns your immune system out.
So have
And it's
you you said I think before we started I was asking you when the book came out and you said it was in December of 2023. So have you gotten the book to um people who are supposed to be experts in Lyme disease?
um, I mean, I haven't really. I've gotten it. There were a lot of people actually. Yeah, I've met a lot of doctors who think it's brilliant work, or yeah, nurse practitioners, things like that. There's several people, but I haven't gotten it in the hands of like these big time people like Robert F. Kennedy and people like him. But I just think if I just think it's if they took a look at this, they would see. I mean,
Well, I think maybe you could start by getting some articles written about it in, like in the New York
oh,
Post or
I have a Substack as well.
Oh,
And
uh-huh.
I'm gonna be writing articles weekly. I took kind of a long break, but I'm kind of back in action again. And I had this I was trying to start this organization called the Biosecurity Ethics and Immune Tolerance Awareness Initiative. And that's another
It's
Substack.
it's
That's
a
a
big lots of
yeah.
words. Yeah.
Yeah, and because it's just such an important thing, it has to be recognized. And
Yes.
I think they don't want to recognize it. Actually, they were trying to induce immune tolerance with the COVID vaccine.
Well,
That's,
yes,
I have evidence.
I was just gonna go there now. So okay, so do you think when you say they were trying to induce this, um so you think that there are some people who do know about immune tolerance and do know about
Absolutely.
do know enough about it so that they could induce it. So who are these people? I mean, are you talking about like Pfizer and the people who made the COVID
So,
vaccine?
so there is a paper on PubMed called Disease Tolerance as a Defense Strategy. Okay.
Huh.
Right. And
Uh-huh.
they're talking about how they could induce immune tolerance as a defense strategy. And it was funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Of
And
course it
so
was.
I
Yeah.
think, they definitely know about this. And they were having these conferences in the 1970s called Immune Tolerance to Microbial Antigen. And they were acknowledging, it's like to induce tolerance as a defense strategy is like the most reckless thing I could think of because in the long term, it basically, you get the chronic diseases, you get the psychiatric symptoms and neurological disorders, and then you get cancers. That's what immune tolerance does. So, and I go into my book on how, like, there's evidence that our public health system was being slowly taken over by enemies, whether that was like, the Soviet Union or British intelligence, probably a mix of both. Um, and it's very interesting because there's a guy in here I talk about named MP Chumakov, and he was a Soviet bioweaponeer. He was weaponizing ticks as well, and they were experimenting. They were exposing the Muslim and Mongolian populations in Siberia to all of these bioweapons.
Huh.
And now this guy also teams up with Albert Sabin to make the oral polio vaccine. Like
Huh.
he was cleared by the FBI, even though they knew like the Soviet Union was involved in active bioterrorism in America, they let this guy team up with this guy MP Chumakov, who also met with Eric Traub on Insel Reams when they captured it,
Huh.
right? So his son, Konstantin Chumakov, approved the COVID vaccine.
Hmm.
And the polio vaccine, of course, was tainted with that SV40, right? That virus SV.
No, I didn't know about that. What's
Oh,
SV40?
oh my God, yeah. So it's a monkey virus that was tainted, that had tainted the polio vaccines and exposed like half the U.S. population to this, probably more. And they found this virus, and it was a lot like that LCM virus that Eric Traub was messing with. And so it was really strange that this guy, MP Chumakov, is meeting with Eric Traub about this whole immune tolerance and LCM. Then he teams up with Albert Sabin, and then this vaccine is tainted by this nasty virus.
Huh.
So it's a cancer virus. And it passes down generations, and there's all these papers about it. So I was really looking into that as well, being like, that's another element we have here. And so, and they also found it strange that what did they use when in the COVID vaccine, they used these SV40 promoter viruses, the little strands of I think it was little strands of this virus so that it makes your cells produce this spike protein. So it was just really strange. I mean, how many coincidences do we need? We've got MP Shumakov's son. He he came into our public health system in the 1980s because of Albert Sabin vouching for him, and he gets into the FDA. He was running vaccine safety and review at the FDA and
Huh.
involved with the COVID vaccine, which turns out has this SV40 promoter, and now there's all these papers linking it to cancer. I mean, or there's one recently COVID vaccination and post-infection cancer signals, evaluating patterns and potential biological mechanisms. So these, a lot of people have heard of these super cancers that people have been getting after getting that COVID vaccine. And this is all kind of relates to this immune tolerance thing that Eric Traub had found. And to know that they're trying to use that as a defense strategy is like beyond comprehension why they would do something like that.
I mean, instead of using it as a way to help people, to prevent illness or to cure illness, they're using it as a bioweapon against Americans, is what you're
Yeah, and
saying.
then the people in the public health system are trying to use it as a vaccine. Like,
And yes, yeah, but I mean that they know that this is dangerous, that it's what
yeah,
it's going to produce. So
that's yeah,
so how is it that I mean, is it that there's such corruption on so many levels? Like I'm wondering, how is this being allowed to happen? Is it so many different
exactly.
levels of corruption? Is it that people don't know? Um, they just don't know what you're talking about. Uh, how is this happening?
It really boggles my mind because it's just so. I mean, to have a guy like Konstantin Shumakov, if you read my book and you see this biowarfare between these two countries, and then having this guy come over here and run vaccine safety, when you read about who his father is, which I talk about in my book, it's just like, wow, that's amazing. It's horrifying because that's like way too sensitive of a position to put somebody with that kind of background in,
Right,
you know
right.
and then to see that they're trying to use immune tolerance as a form of acceptable immunity is ridiculous when you look at all the research on immune tolerance. It does nothing but wreak havoc on the body, and it just, you get the cancer. I call it the dark triad of immune tolerance: chronic disease, neurological disorders, and cancer.
Huh.
So it doesn't make sense long term because you blunt the immune response. That's their strategy. Blunt the immune response so you don't get this acute COVID, right? But what it does is you may not get COVID, but then you have this long drawn out chronic disease. And it's also now being linked to wasting diseases. Um, Amyloidogenic, they call it. These spike proteins are amyloidogenic.
Is the is the wasting disease what's in Ozempic?
Well, these wasting diseases are like these neurodegenerative diseases that are caused by these amyloid plaques in the brain from all of these spike proteins, and those types of antigens are linked to it. So it's like a diabolical antigen that can be put on many things, and that's what Eric Traub was doing, was trying to spread that as much as he could with all sorts of different agents. Um,
Okay, well,
but
go, I didn't mean to. Sorry to interrupt.
no, it's kind of
It's just that we need to take another break. But when we
sure.
come back, perhaps you can kind of because there are a lot of people who won't really. I'm not sure that everybody will be able to understand all of the terms and things that you've been using. So perhaps you could do like a recap and explain
Yes.
it. You know, like that. Tell it to a fifth grader.
Yeah,
You know
right. No, I don't totally
that.
get it.
Okay. Okay. All right. So we need to take a break. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Dr. Carol's couch. Don't worry if your head is spinning. It's probably not um not Lyme disease yet, but this is a lot to take in, to get your head around because it's especially, I mean, I'm an MD, and it's a lot for me to get my head around because, well, first of all, because we don't want to believe this stuff. We don't want to believe that people in our public health system, our doctors, our government, that there are people in there or were people in there who could be this ignorant or be this malignant, be this want to get people sick in America. I mean, obviously, our foreign countries, but not, we don't want to think that this could come from our own, um, from people, from Americans. So, my guest today, just to repeat it, is Adam Finnegan, A.W. Finnegan. His book is called The Sleeper Agent: The Rise of Lyme Disease, Chronic Illness, and the Great Imitator Antigens of Biological Warfare. And so I asked Adam to just kind of run us through this again, but like like for a fifth grader, um, and so that we can perhaps put this together a little better. Like particularly, for example, we're starting to explain this, um, the immune tolerance. Um, go back. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so like Eric Traub had discovered that, and he decided to use that to make biological weapons. So there were, it's wars between countries, right? And they use these weapons. They want to weaponize nature against people. And this immune tolerance thing would not kill you like outright. It would cause you to have this slow chronic disease. And the whole idea of these bioweapons that cause slow chronic disease uh, was to overwhelm, to tire, exhaust, and overwhelm a country long term. Like it's a very long term strategy, right? Stuff like it's kind of like art of war type stuff. Um, Long term strategy, tire, exhaust, and overwhelm, and also have like economic effects, like people can't work, and the mental illness stuff. I mean, look at what you read in the papers every day. um these things, they caused all of these things, and cancers. So this was something that could cause cancer, neurological disorders, and chronic diseases of all kinds. And so
And they did
he
this by wait. They did this by overwhelming by developing these spirochetes, overwhelming the your immune system so that you can't fight the things that you would normally fight, whether it's germs or viruses or cancer cells or things like that. Correct?
Yeah, and that's the whole idea of why they are calling it tolerance. But I mean, there's another term called immune paralysis that has been used, and it's paralyzing your immune system. That's a more apt term, but they gave it that vague word because they don't want really people to know about it, like because it doesn't. When
Uh-huh.
you hear that word, you don't think of anything malignant, you know? And
Uh-huh.
so the whole idea was they overwhelmed the Soviet Union. They had an active biological warfare program, and Britain also, and Britain was attacking us too. But the Soviet Union developed a really big biowarfare program, and it was like, the guy MP Chumakov that I talked about, he developed all of these weapons, and that could be spread with ticks and insects over there. And everybody was kind of developing biowarfare programs as weapons they could use against each other. But when Eric Traub was over in Germany, the Nazis were doing that, and he was developing it. And it's not just spirochetes. Like you could put that little antigen. So the spirochete's like a little worm, and the antigen is like a little protein that sheds into your bloodstream from the spirochete. That's the antigen that causes that nasty chronic disease. But he could put it on other things as well. It's kind of like the spirochete just delivers it. It sets up an infection in your body too, but it's shedding all of this nasty antigen into your bloodstream. That's what makes you feel so ill. But so the Soviet Union captured his lab, and because they were experimenting with, they had like people, they had slave labor, and they were doing experiments. that if they were brought to Nuremberg, they'd be tried and executed as war criminals. But the Soviet Union was like, okay, no, we can blackmail these people with the war crimes they have and get them to work for us, and then we send them over to America with the help of these. Because there was a guy named Donald McLean, Kim Philby, they called the Cambridge Five Spies and British intelligence. They were involved in this whole thing and sending these Germans over here that were blackmailed, and Eric Traub was one of them. And so they put him on the top of our biowarfare program, thinking he was on our side, right? And he was running all of these biowarfare tests. He was directing them. He was, releasing these ticks on shorebirds. Okay, so the whole idea was called a biological simulant test. It's a simulation of a bioterror attack. It's something that the biodefense industry does, right? And so what they would do is they'd take what they consider a harmless bacteria, spray it all over like a city. They did this in San Francisco in the 1950s with something called Serratia marcescens, except that Eric Traub had secretly weaponized it, and all of these people got sick in San Francisco. There was one death. Um, I think it was like early 1950s. And so that was a simulation test. And it actually came out later that they did that. They were trying to keep it, secret. But they also had these other simulant tests that they would use insects with the same idea. We infect it with a harmless bacteria, and then we put it on these ticks, and we study how it spreads out. And so in with the birds too, and that's why he was going back and forth between Colombia and Plum Island.
Well, what did the birds do?
The birds would just carry the ticks everywhere and act as what they call a reservoir of disease, because birds carry Lyme disease um, and it came from a bird strain, as I was saying before. You put I mean, it's really ridiculous when you think about it, like putting these ticks on birds to spread disease to an enemy. Because Eric Traub talked about how migratory birds could be used as like a vehicle for biological warfare. So when he came over here, he's secretly attacking us, um,
So why
right
are
under.
right under our noses? So why are ticks, Lyme disease ticks, particularly found near horses?
Oh, well, I mean, he also was adapting the spirochete to land animals too, so you
Mhm.
could kind of get this thing to spread out. He was also working on horse diseases as well, and the Lyme disease. I mean, he adapted the spirochete to land animals, and basically it infects like almost everything. Um, I mean, as far as them being near horses, it's just these ticks are found wherever there's like they go for these kind of animals. They're all in the wild. Even the deer, it's been found in deer. Um, so it was kind of like an eco weapon. You can think of it. He
Mhm.
would he would adapt it to all of the animals that could just keep it spreading in an environment. And he actually, so John Loftus knew somebody who actually interrogated Eric Traub, right?
Uh-huh.
When the British intelligence people, those Cambridge Five spies like Donald McLean and Kim Philby, when they defected to Moscow at one point while Eric Traub was over here, and they found out that they were, that they were Soviet double agents and high up in British intelligence, and they knew all our secrets and stuff, and they were involved in sending Eric Traub over here. So certain people in our national security, there was a guy. There was a guy who interrogated Eric Traub. He got tripped up in a lie, and he confessed to being a double agent for the KGB.
Hmm.
Um, his name was Dan Benjamin. Yeah, Dan Benjamin. He was part of Counterintelligence Corps, and there's a segment in my book where John Loftus kind of lays it all out. Um, how they sent him over here and they started attacking us.
So, if John Loftus wrote the foreword or the introduction
Mhm.
to your book, So,
Right.
and he already has this clearance, high government clearance. So isn't he able to promote your book to people in the government who need to know about these things?
Yeah, actually he has because he writes for this intelligence magazine or something, and he's mentioned my book many times and saying how, how this is such amazing important work that we need to be looking at because the chronic disease in America is just off the charts and it's not slowing down.
Uh,
Um, and it really goes back to the vaccines as well because what I basically shown here is that the same all you need is those little antigens. And so our immunology is like completely it's like built on one side of it when there's a whole other side that should be recognized.
uh-huh.
And it's very important in chronic disease. So yeah, I mean, I'm trying to get this book like to a wider audience. I have it on audiobook too now, so I've been selling that from my website. And
Oh, well, we have to give out your website. But
yeah,
what is your website?
it's thesleeperagent.com.
Ah, that's an easy one. Okay.
Yeah.
TheSleeperAgent.com.
Hmm.
Um, okay. Um, have you had any threats? It seems to me that there are probably a lot of people who don't want you spreading this information around. Or maybe not a lot of people, but certain people who are involved in this. Have you gotten any threats, like stop publishing this or go home, go away?
I I mean, there was a point when I was wondering if I was subject to some kind of I don't know what you could say targeting, but when I was writing my book and I had wondered, but I never got like direct threats by anyone, but it was more like the strategy was totally ignore his book. Like just don't bring any attention to it. And that seems to have been their strategy. So I mean, I'm lucky I haven't been, as far as I know, but at one point I may have been. I just didn't have really any evidence of it, and I don't want to fall into that trap of thinking everything that happens to me is a result of this targeting thing. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So
yeah.
I just did my best, wrote my book, didn't think about that, but yeah, there were times when I was like, am I under some kind of attack? It was more than just the illness. It was just like
What made you
I
think this, that you might be under attack?
yeah, like it felt like I get really hot. I don't know. Like it felt like some kind of like electrical. I don't know how to explain it. It's hard to explain without sounding crazy. It was only for a certain period of time though, and then when my book was published, I didn't feel that way. Um,
Uh-huh.
but and I know other people who said this has happened to them as well. Like when I talked to my publisher, Chris Miller, he's like, yeah, this is something that many other authors doing research like this have gone through. So
Huh.
I don't know. I mean,
Maybe you need to start a Facebook group for that, to bring these authors together.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely a thing. But I just did my best and I'm really proud of the work that I did. I think it's important work. And, it's not so much about me, it's about the health of our entire countries. Like we need to help these people. This is something that is so important, and we can't continue to keep loading people up with these antigens that are causing these chronic diseases, you
Absolutely.
know?
Absolutely. Well, I didn't take the COVID vaccine. I wouldn't let my daughter.
I was injured by a Hep B vaccine in eighth grade, right? The last vaccine I got was in 2013, and I never, after that, stopped. I didn't get absolutely did not get the COVID vaccine. And I was actually publishing articles about how it would cause immune tolerance,
Uh-huh.
um, and on an old site. And so I was very much aware, and it was hard because I knew how much harm it was going to do, but I could really do nothing about it. Like I scream, shout to
Uh-huh.
everybody as much as I could. But it's like, who's this guy?
Yeah.
How would he know anything?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
But
Uh,
it's yeah, it's like a
well,
hermit, kind of like the hermit idea, where he's very intelligent and figures out all this stuff, but everybody
yes,
thinks he's
right.
crazy.
I like that character. And I like you, and I think this is really important. And again, the Adams Finnegan's website is thesleeperagent.com. So I really suggest that you go check this out and check out his book. Again, it's called The Sleeper Agent, The Rise of Lyme Disease, Chronic Illness, and the Great Imitator Antigens of Biological Warfare. Because if you know somebody who has had Lyme disease or some other chronic illness, you know just how sneaky it is. I know from my friends that no most doctors really don't know how to treat it, and they try this and they try that, but it really doesn't work for the most part. So this is a very serious phenomenon. Well,
Hmm.
thank you, Adam, and thank you all for
Yeah.
listening. You've been listening to Dr. Carol's Couch, and I'm your psychiatrist host.